Research shows that placing children in out-of-home care is associated with significant risks to the child's mental health, development, and long-term life outcomes. Long-term or unstable placements can cause emotional stress, impaired attachment, and an increased risk of mental ill health, academic difficulties, and social marginalization. Studies show that children in out-of-home care have a higher prevalence of suicidal ideation, behavioral problems, and future marginalization compared to children who receive adequate support within their homes. Children with neurodevelopmental disabilities, such as autism and ADHD, are particularly vulnerable to placement. They are more dependent on predictability, familiar relationships, and stable routines. Separation and environmental changes can cause dysregulation, stress, developmental regression, and emotional alienation. These reactions are often misinterpreted as behavioral problems, increasing the risk of continued or permanent placement. Research shows that children with NDD who receive adapted support in the home more often have better long-term well-being than children placed outside the home. Attachment is a fundamental biological and psychological process that develops through continuous, everyday caregiving. Attachment cannot be paused or preserved during prolonged separation. Long-term separation from primary caregivers increases the risk of insecure or disorganized attachment, emotional alienation, and the child no longer experiencing the home as their own. When children are reunited after a long period, they may experience their parents as strangers, which is a predictable consequence of separation, not an expression of lack of will or love. Research on reunification after long-term placement shows that many children are replaced into care. The risk of replacement increases when reunification occurs late, when the relationship has already weakened, or when aftercare and support are insufficient. Difficulties following reunification should therefore not be interpreted as evidence that the family is unsuitable, but as consequences of separation and inadequate support. Long-term placements can thus complicate or prevent reunification, even when parents have improved their circumstances. Placements can create problems that are later used to justify continued care. Instability, repeated moves, and long periods in out-of-home care are associated with increased mental ill health, relational difficulties, and academic problems. When these consequences are used as arguments against reunification, a circular reasoning emerges in which the effects of separation become evidence for the necessity of separation. Children with NDD are particularly affected by these patterns. Stress reactions, developmental regression, and behavioral changes are often misinterpreted as poor adaptation. This increases the risk of continued separation, despite the fact that the problems themselves are created or exacerbated by the placement. The LVU is intended as a temporary protective law. Compulsory care should only be used when absolutely necessary and for as short a time as possible. The principle of proportionality requires that interventions in family life do not go further than what is necessary to protect the child. Long-term placements without active and consistent efforts toward reunification risk violating the intent of the law and the child's right to family life under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Research delivers a clear message. Long-term placements alter relationships, attachment, and the child's sense of belonging. Separation can itself cause harm. Through the passage of time, placements can therefore complicate or make reunification impossible. Ignoring this is to ignore established knowledge about child development. To ensure that protection never occurs at the expense of the child's long-term relationships, LVU implementation must actively work to preserve and support attachment to parents. Without this, the system risks causing the very harm the law is intended to prevent. Core statement. When a child is kept separated from their parents for a long time, the relationship fundamentally changes. Referring to the child's distance, weakened attachment, or difficulties at reunification as reasons for continued care is to use the consequences of separation as proof of its necessity. This contradicts research, the principle of proportionality, and the child's right to family life.